Hi everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. Today I'm really happy to be joined by Emily Crookston, who is the owner and the decider of all things at Pocket PhD. So thank you for joining me, Emily.
Hey Teddy, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So what do you mean? What does the owner and decider of all things at Pocket PhD mean?
Yeah, that's my little tongue-in-cheek way of referring to myself. I always prefer owner to CEO. I am mainly a solopreneur, though I sometimes work with other writers as a contractor, and I just use that as a designation to say, it's my business, I'm in charge, and I make all the decisions here. So yeah, just my cute way of calling myself an owner.
Oh, perfect. Well, tell me about Pocket PhD and what it exactly is you do.
Yeah. So I used to be a philosophy professor. I used to teach philosophy. So that's where the PhD side comes from. I do have a PhD in philosophy, but I started out as a writer of blogs, a ghost blogger, I guess, writing a bunch of blogs for folks. And at some point I realized, if I want to make a living writing content, blogging is probably not going to cut it. That's a lot of blogs to write every week. And of course now, 10 years later, blogs for business have become less and less of a thing. So at some point, maybe 5-6 years ago, I said I could write longer things and started writing books for people. So now I mainly do business book ghostwriting, and I also do developmental editing. So you already have your book finished and you need sort of a first reader. You need someone to help you organize it, rearrange it. I can step in and do that work as well. But yeah, I help all people with all things related to writing business books these days.
Perfect. So when you're doing the ghostwriting, you're mostly focusing on business books. So is there a particular type of client you usually try and work with?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much industry agnostic. I've written everything from like heavy research books with 6 different authors. So it makes it even weirder, right? A ghostwriter working with 6 different authors. So lots of authors on that kind of book. To, your basic kind of how-to or personal development, professional development type books. One of my recent projects was with a client who's a productivity coach. Actually, today is her launch day for her book, so it's super exciting. But she's written this book about productivity tips for everyone from a manager to C-suite to, an individual team member. And, if you feel like all you're doing all day long is putting out fires and you get to the end of your workday and you're like, what did I do today? Like trying to get some space in there, help you kind of think bigger and do more high value work, that kind of things.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So when people are deciding whether they want to write a book, and I think this is you've got a new book come out, which is Unwritten,
Yes.
the Thought Leader's Guide to Not Overthinking Your Business Book. And I think one of the key points in that is when people are writing their book, they need to make sure they have a really compelling business case for writing that book. Yeah. So how do you help people to decide on that business case?
Yeah, that's right. I think that if you're going to write a book for your business, you need to think very hard about the business case. A lot of business owners say, I don't have a book. My friend wrote a book. I want to be an author, but they don't always think hard about how that book fits in with their business strategy. And writing a book is a lot of work, a lot of time, probably a lot of money that, if it doesn't make sense for your business and you can't see how it's going to help your business grow, then it probably just doesn't make sense to write that book right now. So I tell people, think about how you want your business to grow, how you want this book to fit in. Often that's lead generation. So my productivity client, she's a coach. She wants to get into companies to talk to their teams about productivity. And so now she has a book and she can say, buy my book, we'll do a training, and then I can help you figure out, what more help you need from there, right? So it grows her business because it gets her in front of more would-be clients. It makes her stand out as an authority in her space. Another place that business books are really helpful is if you want to you want to have a speaking career, or you want to build speaking into the business strategy, or you're already a speaker, but you want to get paid more to speak, or you want to get on bigger stages as well. Yeah. So I get people, brainstorming about how a book might tie into their business, how it might support their business. And I try to get them, most importantly, away from thinking about, I want to be a best-selling author, because most people for a business book, that's not the best goal for you. That's a great goal if you're Oprah, or, you're already pretty famous, or you already have a bestseller, or you want to be a fiction author and make money on your fiction book. But for a business book, book sales is probably not where you're going to make money.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with nonfiction and business books, that bestseller rank is so easily manipulated, and so many people just want to be like, I want to be a best-selling author so they can say it, but I'm
Yes.
telling you, I know this for a fact. 9 out of 10 of them are just paying for thousands of dollars of ads so they can appear near the top.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Everyone is a bestseller on Amazon also, right? I mean, you have to do something very wrong not to have a bestseller in some genre on Amazon.
yeah,
But that's really kind of misleading if you don't know
yeah, for
how it
sure.
works, right? Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, as you mentioned, a lot of business people, they say, I want to have a book because for the reasons you said. It could be lead generation, it could be they want to get speaking, just to improve their profile in the business they're in. So when it comes to thinking about that compelling business case, so that's the reason they want to do it is because of those reasons. But when you're brainstorming ideas of them, what sort of angles do you usually try and speak to them about to make their book a bit different to everything else that's already out there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Having a point of view is really important, right? Because otherwise your book ends up sounding like every other person's book out there,
Yeah,
especially something like productivity. How many productivity books are there? There's millions
yeah,
of productivity books, right? So
yeah,
yeah, you have to think about, it often comes down to audience, who are you talking to? Because, and this is a place where a lot of authors also get tripped up because they think, well, I'm talking to everyone. I'm talking, anyone could read this book. And I always say, of course, anyone could read this book. Yes. Anyone from a college grad to a seasoned professional probably could get something out of your book. But when you're writing, you have to think about a very specific audience that you're writing to. So if you want to work with leaders who are vice presidents or directors, or if you're really talking to managers with teams, right, have that audience in the back of your mind. And it's often really good to even think about one specific person you're writing to, because then your examples get very specific, because if it's too broad, then yeah, people are going to get lost. So that's the first tip, is to think hard about what the audience is and what they need, because that kind of automatically shifts you into something a bit different from every other book out there. So that's one thing. But another thing is just to think about what you do differently from your competitors, what you do, it's the same question as what's your unique value proposition when you're developing your business plan or your business model. What is it that you do especially different? What is it that no one, I also like this question, what is it that no one can get away with without knowing when they work with you, right? What is the thing that someone's not going to be able to leave your presence without
yeah,
understanding or without knowing? And that can help you kind of sketch out your book.
yeah. And as a developmental editor, and when you're working with business people, it's that you have quite a close relationship with them when you're building out that book. It's not a case of someone writing the book and being, hey, can you go and edit this? It's like the process you work with them along the way. So what do you do that helps business people to get that, unique perspective out? Are there any tips you do to try and coax out
Yeah.
that really specific bits of information?
Yeah. This is a great question. So often what I do with my developmental editing is, they have a manuscript, but it often that point of view is missing because, sometimes as you're writing a book, it's funny how much your thinking shifts, especially if you're working on it over 6 months or a year or more, right? So you might write chapter 1 a year ago, and then you get to the end and you're like, you've changed your definition, or something has shifted, and you have to go back and fix all those parts. So I'm often there doing that kind of cleanup work. But yeah, there's a lot of questions about consistency. Does this still make sense to your audience? And it's funny, I ask that audience question so many times for
Yeah,
my clients. It's just often comes up again and again. I'm always like, litmus testing, what we're writing against that audience, and the positioning, right? Positioning is another important piece. I talk a bit about this in my own book, because you have to know where you want your book to sit on the shelf in the bookstore. Whose book ideally would you like to be next to?
yeah,
And that can really help you think about the positioning. Like, is this style, does the style work for you? Is it going to grab the audience? And one thing that I think, one big mistake that people make when it comes to positioning is they are telling their story, right? When you write a book, you're writing it from your own perspective. You have to shift that perspective to putting yourself in the shoes of your reader. And that can be, difficult. The book should be reader-centric, not author-centric. Even
yeah,
if you're writing a memoir, and a lot of my books that I work on contain memoir elements to them. And yeah, it's about you, but why should a reader read your story? Why should
yeah,
they keep turning the page? So often just these simple questions, like, why should a reader keep keep going with this 14-page introduction, right? Can help you, like, what's the hook? Let's get the reader into this a little bit. So yeah.
It sounds like that a lot of people, well, it sounds like the reason you wrote this book, the Overthinking book, is because it from what you're describing, a lot of people do really overthink this exact thing you're talking about, like writing too much or not knowing where they're going. So what are the common traps with overthinking, and like what are the problems that can cause?
Yeah. So I think you can overthink your book at any stage. That's the truth. And I work a lot with thought leaders. So, you've built your business, you built your success around thinking, right? So you think that you can think your way out of everything. And that is true to some extent, but you can also tend into overthinking with it. And so one way you can overthink is by spending way too much time planning out your book and, asking yourself a million questions before you even start writing. And you can have these writer's block because of this, right? You can think, oh, I don't know what I'm going to write. And I think people don't realize how much thinking happens when you actually put your fingers on the keyboard and just start wherever you start. I think people overthink that they need to write their book in perfect order. They need to start on page 1 and end on page 120. And that's not true. You can get very stuck, like rewriting the introduction 1,000 times. So you can get stuck in the editing phase where you're just, rewriting even as you're trying to get that draft finished. So that's one of my big tips that helps avoid overthinking, is just get to that messy draft. That's your first goal. Get it out as fast as you can. And if you feel stuck, move to a different chapter. If you feel like you don't know what to write anything, write what you know and start with that.
Yeah. Now, when people working with you and I think a lot of people, especially readers, make the assumption that books are written like almost entirely by the people that are obviously the author on them. But your services, you do ghostwriting, the editing. It sounds like a lot of the work is done by other people. How do you try and help the person who's the author to maintain the authenticity when you're doing that?
Yeah, this is really important if you work with a ghostwriter, if you have anyone helping you with the book. And I think that is a misconception sometimes, that ghostwriters are actually the ones doing the thought, doing the thinking, doing the work. I can assure you that's not the case. I've written many books where I'm not an expert at all, and I rely on my audience or my client to bring me their ideas, and then I just get to write about them. I do the discipline of the writing, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's authorship and authenticity and all of that. I really, I listen very hard for their voice and even like jokes that they make. Like all of these things are cues and clues for me as I'm writing. I almost think of it as method acting sometimes. Like I hear my author's voice in my head when I'm writing, and I want, I'm always asking, does this sound like them? And I tell my clients, I say, you can be as honest as you want. And if you would never say it like this, tell me. I would never say it like this. That's really important feedback for me to have. But yeah, so I generally will do the writing, and then my clients will edit it. And that really helps them take ownership over the book. And I always say, feel free to write as much as you want. You're paying me to do the discipline of the writing, but if you feel strongly that you want to write this story, go ahead and write that story, and then I can edit it. I can help you figure out what you need.
So if someone is writing, if you're ghostwriting a book for someone, and what amount of information do they need to prepare beforehand in order for you to create an amazing book?
Yeah, so I used to do it where I required my clients to bring me a working outline to start. I've shifted away from that a little bit because I'm using AI a little bit in my work. And so I really like to use AI at that brainstorming stage, trying to figure out what the book is about. So now it's more, come to me with a rough idea of what you want to write about, or at least just be able to like record yourself for 10 minutes talking about your book. And then I can take that transcript and drop it into AI, and I can play around with it and see what kind of ideas we can start generating. I never use AI when I'm to directly do any writing for me. I don't have it write drafts, but I really like it as a thought partner and an assistant in that direction. So yeah, now I actually have a lot of fun helping my clients figure out what their book idea is. I used to really shy away from that because, again, I'm not the expert. I don't know what you should be writing, because sometimes people come to ghostwriters and they say things like, oh, well, you tell me, you're the expert. What's a really good book in what would be a great book in this genre? And I'm like, oh gosh, you know your industry better than I do. You know your audience better than I do. I'm here to support you in figuring out what's best.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to help now, kind of play along and figure out that path.
What sorts of questions should the owners of these businesses that come to you be asking themselves before they get to that sort of manuscript writing?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to think is, if people were going to work with a ghostwriter, obviously they could just turn up with no real thought, and then
Yeah.
that's probably not going to produce the best book. But if they come to you
Right.
with particular bits of information, that's going to help loads. Because I've had books ghostwritten myself, and I've written outlines. They've not been at the level of your books. They're much more simple books. But I'm trying to think, what information would it be the business people that listen to this, what would they need to ask in order to come to you with the best possible amount of information for you to write the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing is just being able, and it's surprisingly hard for people, being able to talk about what you do on a daily basis with your clients. It's really great if you have a process, if you have like what do we call it? An SOP, a standard operating procedure, something along those lines that you use with your clients, you step by step, here's how I do it. And to be able to talk me through, like, how does my client find me? What's their question? What's their problem? How do I solve that problem? So knowing what problems your clients have is a really good starting point. And also knowing your own motivations, beyond the business case for the book, beyond I want to be an author. Why are you writing this book? I have a whole section in my book about finding your book's why. So people talk a lot about finding their purpose behind their business, right? The why behind your business. But what about the book, right? The book is you can almost think of your book as you're starting a new business, or you have a new product that you're going to sell. That's what it is. And so if you were starting a new strain of income, a new income stream for yourself, why do you even want to go in that direction? So you should be thinking the same way about your book.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Just getting that opinion, especially out of you, like, you must have a way of expressing yourself. Otherwise, what's the reason for you writing the book in the first place?
Right.
I speak to a lot of clients who want to write productivity books, and I'm thinking, well, you really want to go and compete with Atomic Habits? Like, what are you doing? Like,
exactly.
How are you going to make your book different to what everyone else is doing?
Right. Yeah. It's so funny. You do a thing for so long, and you suddenly think you can teach people about how to do it. Right. And that might be the case. And that's often the case because you have figured some things out. But what you have to understand is, what's that unique thing that you figured out? What's the, the $1 million idea, if you will, or, whatever, what is it that makes you really stand out so that you can write the book? And a lot of the times you shouldn't be thinking about competing with the big guys, because that's really hard to do, and probably impossible for if you're just a business owner just trying to grow your business. You don't have to compete, which is the good news. But you have to be thinking about I think the key is, if you can't come up with a really good title for your book, then you might not have something unique. It can be very hard to come up with a title if you don't if you don't have a point of view. But if that title kind of pops into your head, then that's a good indication that you've got a great book idea.
Yeah, nice. That's a really nice idea. Now, when you're doing this work with your writers, and I think you touched on it just slightly, but a lot of people are using AI, obviously, to either improve their productivity or to, even write parts of the book. So when you're using AI, or you're recommending people and they're using AI as well, do you have any sort of guidelines or boundaries that you think they should be sticking to, or any good ways of mastering their prompts so that it's like making sure you're getting the best output?
Yeah, this is a great question. So one of the things I think that's really important with using AI is telling it what you need from it. So sometimes people say, I'm writing a book about X, give me 3 book descriptions, right? And that you'll get some very generic book descriptions that feel very corporate-y, that feel very like already been done, right? Because AI is not going to give you something groundbreaking with just that kind of prompt. But if you say, hey, I want you to role play with me, you're going to be my first reader, and here's the description of who you are, and you describe your client, or you describe the target reader that you're aiming at, and you describe it to a T, like as much as you can, right? Very detailed, as much detail as you can give it. And then you might even prompt further. You might even say, what am I missing? What more information do you need to play this role as my first reader. And then from there, you kind of building an avatar, right? You're building a kind of avatar for yourself. And then from there, you can say, okay, I want to write a book about X. Here are my ideas. And maybe you give it a few more sentences about the book. And then you ask it, okay, give me 3 book descriptions. That will give you a much better result. And then you can start using it. Again, I like to use it as brainstorming, not necessarily drafting. But if you give it enough prompts and if you give it enough of a specific description of what you're looking for, you'll get a much better result. And I think people give up really soon with AI sometimes when they're just like, it's not giving me good information, but they haven't given it enough input. And then you can save it in the knowledge base, depending on what AI you're using. You can save that information, and then you'll have a really good agent that you've created to work with. Mm-hmm.
Lovely. Now I've got one more question, and it's about the when you're writing books. I suppose a lot, especially with your clients that you work with, but this will be practical for everybody. But people are busy and they've got lots of other things on. Now they don't have time to focus on things like, focus on maintaining focus, for example, or keeping their business going whilst they're also writing a book. So how do you help people to maintain that focus, get the momentum, and also find the time really to write the book?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest questions that I get. And it's honestly probably the hardest part about writing a book and running a business at the same time. It's why a lot of people come to me and say, I've been trying to write a book for 5 years or 10 years, and I'm never getting it done. And I get it. But I think the number one thing you could do is set yourself a word count goal. And I like to set myself a weekly word count goal, because that, to me, sets me up for success. Because if you do daily and you miss a day, you're like, I missed a day, and then you give up, right? But if it's weekly, you could miss a couple days and you still have time to hit your goal, especially if the goal is realistic for you. So I say, do a couple of timed writing sessions, figure out how long it takes you to write like 500 words or 1,000 words, and figure out, okay, I could reasonably spend 2 hours a week working on my book. Maybe it's on the weekend. Maybe you get up early one day, right? You find these pockets of time, but you kind of figure out how much time you have and use that to set your word count goal, your weekly word count goal. And then that'll give you a really good idea, a benchmark of, how long it will take you to write your first draft. I always tell people that a reasonable draft is 40,000 words. If you have 60,000, great, but 40,000 words is a really good word count for a business book. That's about 100 to 150 pages when it's printed. And so you can say, okay, I want to get to 40,000 words by November. How many words a week do I have to write to get there? And then, you start trucking away, start tapping away at the keyboard. Yep.
Yeah. So your book, Unwritten, The Thought Leader's Guide to Not Overthinking Your Business Book, that's available everywhere. Tell us just a little bit about that book and why people should buy it.
Yeah. So that's my book on how to write a business book.
Yep.
So it's a little bit meta. Yeah, but it's really how to write a business book if you are a business owner. And it talks about everything from planning to writing to promotion and publishing. So it's got 3 parts, and walk you through how to get your book done.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned it goes into publishing as well. Do you recommend people actually try and find publishers for their books, or is it mostly through self-publishing?
Yeah, most of my clients are self-published. I think that makes the most sense for business books because it's faster. You own all the rights to it. And then again, you're not really focused on being a bestseller. So, that helps you keep focused on what matters for you as a business book writer.
Great. And if people wanted to work with you, what are the sorts of people you'd be looking for as your ideal clients?
Yeah, so anybody who wants to write a book to grow their business, that's where I'm looking. So again, that's often how-to books or guides. It's also personal development. A little bit of self-help is in there as well. I've written books with coaches, lots of coaches, but I really love to work with experts to get big ideas out of their heads and into the world.
Lovely. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I've really enjoyed breaking down exactly how to write a business book. I mean, I think you could go away and get this done yourself, but working with someone like you as a developmental editor is going to be super helpful as you break down those ideas and get it really professional. I think that's going to help loads. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Teddy. It's been fun.
Yeah, great. If people want to get in touch, where's the best place to follow you around the internet?
Yeah, so I am available on LinkedIn. You can find me, Emily Crookston, there, but also my website is thepocketphd.com.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just one last question before we go, and that's the question we ask for everyone, and that's what's a book you recommend everyone should be reading?
Yeah, sure. So I am right now just starting to get into Gretchen Rubin's book, Better Than Before. So we've talked a bit about productivity books in this call, and competing with Atomic Habits, and this is one of those books. So it's all about why do some habits stick and others don't. It's really interesting, full of good research as well as practical tips. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's usually because you're reading productivity books rather than being productive.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes productivity is just getting down to it. Yeah, getting to work. Yeah. It's true.
Well, thanks, Emily, for joining. It's been great chatting. We'll speak soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Teddy.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.